I'm so excited about today. And you say, well, yeah, what about us? Are we excited? Well, I want you to get excited when we get into talking about what I want to do today. And I want you to think about with me, I want to review something that all of you know. Everybody knows the story, but I want to go back and review this. And I want to look at it really close because on the other side of the story is where I really want to get. And I'm talking about the Exodus, from Egypt. If you go and you talk about Israelites had been in Egypt 400, one place says 430 years. Moses comes to get them out. God rescues them, takes them out, miracles everywhere. They are traveling through the wilderness. They complain all along the way, but God miraculously comes and provides everything they need. And they're traveling all the way across the wilderness. And I mean, you know all the stuff that happens while they were going across the wilderness. And every time God comes through and miraculously, manna, quail, water. I mean, it's just amazing. Then they finally get to the promised land. Now, when they get to the promised land, Moses sent out 12 spies. We know all about the 12 spies. He sent out 12 spies, and what did they do? They spent 40 days looking over the land. Come back, 10 of them said, all of them said, the place is beautiful, it's great, it's wonderful, it's got all kind of things, it's got everything we need. Except there's some big jokers living there. Those guys are huge. Have you seen that? You know who Og, the king of Bashan, if you read about him, and in Deuteronomy, I think it's 3, it says, Og's bed was 13 and a half feet long and 6 foot wide. That was his bed. Now we're thinking 7 foot is huge. Think about a guy who needed a bed 13 and a half foot long and 6 foot wide. That's as tall as me. This was would he have done good in the WWE? Think about that, son. But they saw these giants and they said, there are huge people there. They're we're like grasshoppers in their sight. And here are around 2 million Israelites right at the door of the promised land. God has provided for them all the way across this wilderness, killed the Egyptian army in the Red Sea. He's brought them all the way across safely, and they get right to the door, and they send 12 spies out there. 10 spies come back and say, we can't do it. We cannot do it. The people are too strong. There's too many of them. The cities are they got walls that reach up to heaven. We cannot defeat these people. Why did he bring us out here in the first place? Let's go back to Egypt. At least we had food while we were being slaves. And they rebelled against God, and right on the spot, everything changed. Everything changed. I want you to go to Numbers chapter 14. To me, this is a very, very sad piece of scripture. To think that these people had been slaves. You think about Egypt, 400 years, how many of those 2 million that came out of Egypt had never known anything but slavery? They were born in slavery. They died in slavery over and over again, and the group that they were bringing out of Egypt had never known anything but slavery. And they got a chance to be free, and God said, I'm taking you to a land that I'm going to give you, and you can live there. The only thing you have to do is just defeat the people that's there, and I will do the fighting for you. Don't worry about that. I will take care of it. They get to the promised land, and 10 spies come back and say, we can't do it. I want you to look at what God, go to verse 28, chapter 14, look at verse 28. We won't read it all. It just says, And God said, say unto them, as truly as I live, saith the Lord, as you have spoken in my ears, so will I do to you. Your carcasses shall fall. Now, I'm reading out of King James. I know some of you going, what in the world is he reading? I'm reading out of King James, so it may be a little different. Your carcasses shall fall in this wilderness, and all that were numbered of you according to your whole number from 20 years old and upward, which have murmured against me, doubtless you shall not come into the land concerning which I swear to make you dwell in. 20 years old and upward, he said, you will not see the promised land. He said, your carcasses will fall in the wilderness. When I see that, the first thing I think of is these locusts are here. You know, the shell that's left hanging on your front door, or the shell that's left hanging on your shed or your barn, where the larva of the locust was in there, and the locusts come out and that shell is still hanging there. That's the first thing I think of when he says, your carcasses will be thrown out into the wilderness and you will never see the promised land. I'm thinking a carcass is a dead shell, isn't it? It's just a dead shell of something that was living. He says, I will take every one of you, take you back into the wilderness, and you will die there, and I will take the next bunch to the promised land. Think about if you had been part of that 2 million who were traveling from Egypt to what we would call Israel. Think about if you had been one of them. Now, I don't know about you, but I've thought about this all my life. You're going, boy, why in the world, them Israelites, they were pathetic people. I mean, you can rail on them and say, I cannot believe we weren't there, were we? We weren't there. How many have seen the wilderness we're talking about in Israel? Yeah. Was that the wilderness we were in when we had nothing but black rock? Was that the little black rock that we looking at? Huh? That's close to what it is. If you've seen it, Beth, there's not much there, is it? And hot, brother, hot. And there's nothing there. There's nothing to see except these black rock. And that's all you can see. We don't have a clue what they went through when they come through there. And then they had places where you walk where the trails are this wide and they go like this. Up like this around big old rocks and stuff. And we're talking, we're going, how you get 2 million people through here? I mean, I know it was tough. It was rough. And we talk about a lot of times, boy, I cannot believe they rebelled. I keep wondering, if we had been there, would we have been one of those? Would we have been those 20 and up that never got to see the promised land? Think about another thing. They rebelled. God said, I'm sending you back into the wilderness. They went back into the wilderness. They spent 40 years. You think about that. 40 years looking at the same ground. Looking at the same ground. And there's nothing to see. There's nothing to see. 40 years they stayed there. What do you think they were doing during that time? You think about the promised land is laying back there, not very far away. They had just come from there, but who got to see it? The spies. Think about for 40 years, who was the only people who got to see the promised land and what it looked like? Who were they? Anybody? Was there anybody that saw the promised land? Who? Joshua and Caleb. You think about it, folks. Joshua and Caleb were the only two out of that 2 million who were still alive who had seen the promised land. Do you think that Joshua and Caleb had any questions addressed to them over the 40 years? I mean, can you see Joshua and Caleb walking through the camp and there's 20 people following them and said, hey, tell me the story again of the promised land. I don't think that the 40 years went by without preparation for this next bunch to enter the promised land. I think that the 40 years were spent in preparation for this bunch to go and take the land. I bet they had battle practice, is what I bet. I bet they were fighters. I bet they practiced all the time. I bet Joshua and Caleb were fighters now. And I bet that they started all kind of classes, man, kung fu, tai chi, and all of that, you know. I bet they had all of that going for 40 years. And think about it. What do you think Joshua and Caleb were telling the people? We can't take it. We can't do it. We're going to go back again, but we can't do it. Don't you know Joshua and Caleb, when they had these people standing around, they were talking about, y'all, that you would not believe what's there. And they were talking about, who cares about the giants? There's 2 million of us. We can kill a giant. Surely 2 million of us can kill a giant. I believe Joshua and Caleb pumped this group up for 40 years, ready to go. What happened one day? Well, the last rebellious member of the last generation dies out. And God says, okay, Joshua, let's go. Moses dies. Joshua is the leader. I want you to go to Joshua. Just turn over a little bit to Joshua. Go to chapter 3. Joshua is now in charge. God tells him to be very courageous in chapter 1. He says, you know, I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to take you. And then we get to chapter 3 where they are at the Jordan River ready to go into the promised land. This is the next generation. This is the next generation. This generation, think about it, in 40 years in the desert, they had kids born to them, and they had those kids grow up and have kids again. They have been recovering from those who are dying. They are recovering with younger generations. They've got fighting men. I think about how many fighting men they would have, 18 to 25. And let's look at what happens. They're at the Jordan River. When they cross the Jordan River, they're going to be headed toward Jericho. They're going to be starting to take the promised land. Look at verse 1 in chapter 3. And Joshua rose early in the morning, and they removed from Shittim and came to Jordan, he and all the children of Israel, and lodged there before they passed over. And it came to pass after 3 days that the officers went through the host, and they commanded the people, saying, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the priests, the Levites, bearing it, carrying it, then you shall remove from your place and go after it. They knew that they were fixing to start the conquest. They knew that the battles were coming, something they had been working on, I believe, for 40 years. And here it is. He said, when you see the ark of God coming and the priest carrying it, get up, get your stuff together. We're headed over the river. I bet when that ark come through there, them people were going crazy. I can see this. When the ark comes through there, I bet they're going crazy. Screaming, hollering, yelling. I mean, here is the ark of the covenant, the most powerful thing they know of, and they're following this. Here's something very interesting to me. Look at this next verse. In verse 4, yet there shall be a space between you and it about 2,000 cubits. What? How long is a cubit? 1,000 yards. 1,000 yards? Man, that is a long way. Here's the priest carrying the ark, and they said, keep back at least 1,000 yards. Don't go by. And you're going, I wonder what that's about. Well, I don't really know except for one thing. You think about them 18 to 25-year-old men. They're going, I've been practicing for 20 years with this sword and this spear. Man, I tell you what, we're going to battle. I'm going to get up in front. Come on, guys. We're going to clear the way for them, son. We're going to be the first ones through there. I know God is saying, you get ahead of me, they'll kill you, is what they'll do. Don't get in front of me. But you know what? The next statement is the amazing statement. He says, don't get ahead of the ark. Why? Because you've never passed this way before. Huh? God says, you've never been here before. But I have. God says, I know what's up there. And I know when you need to go and which way you need to go, but you don't. You wait and follow behind me, and I will take you where we need to go. But don't run ahead of me. I'm sorry, but when I read that, I don't know how many times I've read it in my life, but when I read it the other day, I said, good night. These should be verses for Grace Fellowship Church. This might be our, I don't know what kind of verse you call it, but something you put on the wall, where it says, don't get ahead of me because you've never passed this way before. And what am I talking about? What I mean when we've not passed this way before. There may be some people in here who have started a church from scratch, 3 or 4 people, and you started a church, and it grew and grew and grew. Me and Terry have done that. We were one of 7, 2 of 7. You were there too. We were 2 of 7 that started a church, the preacher and 6 other people, and here we went. And now that church is still there, been there for 50 years, running 500 people. We did that. There's a lot of people here that I'm talking about. You've been in one church your whole life. Some people, and I hear people say it all the time, yep, I was going to that church before I was born. Meaning their mother was going and they were in her belly, so they went to church every day, every Sunday. There's a lot of people who have gone to the same church all of their life. And all of a sudden, you're out of that church. They spent your whole life in one church, and now here you are trying to wrap your head around what's going on here. What's another group of people we have? There are people here who have moved from another state, and the chore of finding a place to worship is really hard. It's really hard. I just moved from another city, and I took a year trying to find a place. Trying to find another place is really hard. There are people who have left churches for all kinds of reasons. And when you do that, you're looking for something that feels right to you, that gives you that feeling of comfort, of belonging, or whatever it is that you're looking for. But you're looking for that one place that you're going to feel right. There are people who were not really churchgoers, but decided they would give it a try. If you look at today, people are nervous. People are nervous. I don't know how many people have come up to me and said, what do you think? What about Israel? I mean, there's all kind of things going on today, and it is making people nervous. A lot of people are going, there's times in our history where people are going, this is it. This is the end. This is it, man. We have got to get ready. God is coming back. And right now is one of those times. Right now is one of those times. People are really getting nervous about what's going on. There are people who feel like they're outcast. And they've been kind of tooling around looking for other outcasts where you can kind of come together, That's one of the groups I believe is there. Now, what are you doing if you're an outcast? You're looking for a common goal of doing something a little differently, maybe in serving God. That's what you do when you're an outcast from something. What's the other group? There are some people who are just fed up with the way church is being done. Some people are just fed up with the way church is being done in a lot of places. And they're looking for a fresh worship experience, some kind of new thing, some kind of exciting thing. They're tired of the same old whatever it is that they left for. That's what they're looking for. None of us may have passed this way before that is starting a church. But I am excited because God has begun to do some things in this church that hasn't been done yet. I'm going to tell you, the wilderness, we talk about the wilderness. We've been in the wilderness for over a year, that we went through a time where not a single visitor showed up for a year. And you go, yeah, there's the same 18 of us. Here we are. We're looking really good. Hey, you got some new clothes, man. You got a new shirt on, a year. You come in, you look at the door, and you're going, no. And you go, well, the service is fixing to start. You'd open the door, look out. Nobody there. Okay, here we go. I'm talking about a year. Now, we were in the wilderness, man. That gets discouraging after a while. Was God preparing us? Like he did this like for 40 years, would God say, I'm preparing you for what is going to happen. You need to go through the wilderness. You need to see this discouragement. You need to see these things so you can start getting some things right for when I decide it's time to go. When I say go time, then things are going to happen and it's going to be great. And when God finally said, boom, something happened here one time, and the next week, visitors started coming through the door. And I'm just going, amazing. And then more and more. And amazing people have been joining us, and it has been tremendous. I want you to look at the next verse. Well, look at verse 4 again. He said, stay back from me. Do not get ahead of me, because you don't know what you're doing. You don't know you've never seen this before. You've never passed this way before. You've never tried this before. You don't know what's there, but I do. And then look at verse 5. And Joshua said unto the people, sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Whew. He said, sanctify yourself, set yourself apart as being holy unto God. I think when I see that, I'm thinking one thing that God is really telling these people. Tie yourself to me in a relationship of total dependence upon me. That's what your fathers didn't do. That's what your fathers did not do. They let 10 men come back and override God with what they said, because you were not in a relationship of total dependence when you got to the promised land. I think God is saying you need to have a relationship with me that means I will let God be God, and we will wait and we will move when God says to. And I'm thinking that's what he's really telling them to do. Look at this next part. Sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow, not today, tomorrow, I will do wonders among you. I love that he says, sanctify yourself today. Take today to decide whether you're going to let me be God or you're going to be God. Because see, when we were in the wilderness in this church for a year, what did we do? What are we going to do now? Man, no, how are we going to do that? We're always thinking, well, what are we going to do? How can we do this? What are we going to do here? Let's do this. Let's do that. What are we doing? We're running ahead, aren't we? We're getting ahead of God. We're trying to say, we can figure this out. And God said, no, you can't. No, you can't. Just sit still. Sanctify yourself. Sit still and get ready, because when I say go, everything on the other side is already ready for you. It's prepared, and it's time to hit the go button. It sounds pretty easy to say, yeah, we need to be totally dependent on God. It sounds pretty easy, but it's really very hard, isn't it? Really very hard. And it takes a lot of sanctifying yourselves before you can do that. Look what he says, sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow I will do wonders among you. You think they were excited that night? I got the feeling that they were going, Ooh, what could this be? I'll tell you what it is and I'm done. God says, tomorrow the priest got the ark and walked up to the Jordan River. Interesting thing about the Jordan River was at full flood stage, peak flood stage. I've read where the Jordan River would get sometimes a mile wide at peak flood stage. God brought them there at peak flood stage. I guess God was surprised when he looked over and said, whoa, wait a minute. Man, I didn't know it was going to be that deep. He waited for 3 days, you see. When they got there, he waited for 3 days, I guess, for it to get even higher. It was still peaking, I guess. And he said, now we're going to cross the Jordan River. And he had the priest walk out there, and just like the Red Sea, the second group that has been there, they're crossing the flooded Jordan River on dry ground. You ought to read about what happened when the river opened up for them. Read about that. That's it. The water piled up. It's just great reading that story. God said, tomorrow, not today, tomorrow I will do wonders among you. That's what I'm waiting for. Tomorrow. God is preparing us right now. I can't help it. It's just in my DNA, I guess, but I kind of believe in what we're doing right here. I believe in what we're doing. We've all had doubt. We didn't know if we were going to make it or not. We're just going, man, are we going to make it or not? I believe now we're going to make it. I believe God is showing us, look what I'm doing. Check out the people I'm bringing to you. Check out what's happening. And then sanctify yourself, because tomorrow I'm going to do another wonder. I believe God is always saying, tomorrow. Because why? He says, you're looking at what you got today, but man, you don't have a clue what I'm going to do tomorrow. I believe that this is going to be all right. I believe that we are going to be a church that is going to be able to fight the devil in Hohenwald and beyond. We're talking about this stuff already. How are we going to affect Hohenwald? How are we going to affect, our area, our neighborhood? We've got people that are coming here now, folks that have talents, abilities, they got brains, they've got all kind of things, and I'm just going, God is putting together a crew that is going to be able to be effective for him, and he's going to use this place in a mighty way. I believe it. Y'all look at me like, well, I'm glad you do. I feel like God is saying to us, sanctify yourself today. Sanctify yourself today. And don't go ahead of me because you've not been there before. But I have. So when I say go, you can say, oh, it's ready. It's ready. It's been prepared because he says go. We can stay right here and grow. We can get 100 people in here. You know that? We can get 100 people in here. What can 100 people do? Woo! Big time, big time. I believe that this is going to be a great work for God. I really do. You may not believe that. You might believe it. For a year, we didn't even have a visitor, much less somebody who wanted to be a member. Today, we've got like 19 that we're talking to about becoming members. Good night. That's huge. That's huge. I believe that this is going to be a great work for God. Bow your heads with me, please. Folks, I believe that we have got people who are going to be the backbone of a church that is not only winning people to the Lord, but affecting the whole neighborhood, the whole city, the whole county. I really believe that. but we need you. We need you. Have you felt it? Do you believe that God is going to use this place? We've been here for 2 or 3 years, and I mean, this is the time that I'm saying, here is what we came for. This is what we're doing here. The group that God is bringing is amazing. Do you feel like this is where God wants you? And are you willing to be used by Him? That's the question.